Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gaming Banter with David and Ryan. This week we are joined with our new writer, Chris,
Hello.
Woo!
and and we got David,
Hello!
and Derek's over there too, I guess. Derek,
Hey, come on.
Hiding in the dark.
Where's the enthusiasm? It's
Evil.
broad daylight.
Derek.
There's a skylight.
Derek.
There's a skylight, like right there. Like, it's not my fault. I blame my webcam.
I'm amazed that every time we do this with Derek, he just always has like a dark room. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. It looks like death incarnate. That's
Turn
Derek.
to the dark side of the force.
Ah.
Ah. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2. So Derek and I have a very strong position on this. He actually believes that Knights of the Old Republic 2 is better than 1, which I don't understand.
I mean, it doesn't have to be better, but it's definitely not a flop like you think it is. Like,
I mean,
I enjoyed it more. That doesn't make it a better game, but it's not a flop. Like, it was a good game.
okay, so maybe
Did a
we
lot
should
of awesome stuff.
maybe we should focus this question more on was the second one a flop or not? You know, not whether or not it's better than 1 or 2. We'll let Chris and David decide, since they haven't played it, which they would be more likely to play. But we're just going to discuss if 2 is going to be a flop. Does that sound fair?
Okay, bring it
Okay.
on. I'll
All right.
destroy you in both categories.
They're both flops. Wait, they're both
Wait,
I'll
flops.
argue.
What?
I'll argue circles around you, and you'll cry.
All right, so go ahead. Start your reasons why it's not a flop.
I
Go
mean,
for it.
all right. I think here are the reasons why people didn't like Knights of the Old Republic 2, in my opinion. I don't think these are very valid reasons. Well, one of them is. One of them's okay. Part of the problem with Knights of the Old Republic 2 is that it was extremely buggy on release. Like, it didn't matter whether you played it on the Xbox or whether you got it on PC. There was a lot of crap that just didn't always work right. Like, and you get halfway through the game and your save state would get screwed over by some weird, crazy bug, and you couldn't continue to progress and stuff. And people really blasted the game on that. And that I think is a semi-legitimate concern. But if you can look past that and look past the really rushed production values, I think there's a really great game underneath. The thing I enjoyed so much about Knights of the Old Republic 2 was it was a Star Wars game that tried something new and something different. And it wasn't just something different, it was something enjoyably interesting different. It had a completely different take on kind of, or maybe it would be better to say there was kind of an evolution of the idea of how the Force works. Like the idea that since the Force is like a living thing, kind of, that like binds the galaxy together, the idea that the Force could die was just kind of fascinating. And the idea that the Force could be wounded, like either as an entity or inside of an individual, was also kind of fascinating. And on top of that, like, I mean, I think that game had the most memorable, outside of the twist ending from KOTOR 1, it had the most memorable characters of any Star Wars thing, like outside of Darth Vader. Like, the Dark Lords of the Sith in KOTOR 2 were super awesome and super interesting, and they, like, especially Darth Traya. Like, for the first time, Star Wars had a character whose motivations were complicated, and you couldn't just paint her into the dark side, light side box. Like, all of a sudden you have this complicated individual who has all these interesting motivations, and that's not something that I think a lot of the Star Wars games have. You have a lot of either black or white characters. Oh, he's a villain because he shoots force lightning from his fingers, and he chokes you with the Force. He must be evil. Whatever.
So, I guess this is where I'll jump in. And so, on your point of complicated characters, I would actually argue that Knights of the Old Republic 1 had the same thing. There's plenty of Force users that weren't quite light side and weren't dark side. They were gray. And it was kind of the first introduction of characters that weren't, one or the other. I forget the name of the character, but it was a guy. He was
Chili Bindo.
Yeah, and he was the great character, and so I mean that was kind of already done. But that's not even my main problem with Knights of the Old Republic 2. My problem was I played it on Xbox. Now the Xbox release happened in December, and December of 2004. Then I think it was 2004. Yeah, December 2004. It didn't come out on PC until 2 months after that. So if you played it on PC, you didn't get to experience the same problems that I got to experience on the Xbox. The main problem being that the story made absolutely no sense. You know, you got into it, and because it was so buggy, if you played it dark side first, which is what I did, I went through and played it as dark side the first time through, the story doesn't make any sense. There is no option. The important thing with Knights of the Old Republic was if you could choose dark side and light side for the first time in really a game. There was 2 paths to take, and there was 2 definitive stories. If you did the dark side first in Knights of the Old Republic 2, you didn't understand the story. It wasn't clear because it was so buggy, because there were so many problems. I got to the end, I'm like, what the heck just happened? I have no idea. Like, in the conversation at the very end of the game, I remember her going from like very hateful speech and anger toward each other, and then all of a sudden she was like happy and like very nice and everything like that. It's like something is missing here. There is dialogue missing. There is part of the story that is missing that doesn't make any sense. And so I had to play it through on light side to figure out what was going on. And that's something that sticks in my mind very, very fervently, is that I didn't understand what was going on. I had to play the game twice just to figure out why the ending didn't make any sense for the dark side. Now, if I had played it linear like most people and gone light side first and then dark side, I would have completely understood. But the way the game stood at release on Xbox is I didn't understand that unless I played it through in the way that they assumed you were going to play through it. Now, I know that later on there were some additional story pieces that were released, and it made the story great and everything. And I don't argue that the story in Knights of the Old Republic 2 was a bad story. My argument is that they released a buggy game that by itself you had to play through multiple times to figure out what the game was. Now, I still played through it twice because I loved, the Knights of the Old Republic series. But the fact of the matter is, if you're releasing a game that's incomplete and you're releasing a game that the story doesn't make any sense to the user, and I read a lot of stories. I read a lot of novels. I've got hundreds of novels, and I do all that. So it's not that I don't understand the story. It's just that it didn't make any sense. So, I mean, that's why I think it's a flop. Not because the story's bad, not because they didn't try anything new or interesting. It's because they released an incomplete game that didn't make any sense unless you played it a particular way. And then the other ending made sense. Does that make... I mean, that's basically my point.
Yeah, I mean, I played it on the Xbox as well, but I never played the Dark Side pad. So, like, I guess I didn't have that experience. I really don't know. I don't know what happens when you play Dark Side. But, like... even then, like, even when you have a game that releases and it's buggy, I don't mind that as much as long as they fix it. Like, I don't think that's a real sticking point for me in terms of a game being a flop. It definitely hurts it. Like, Rome releasing and being terrible, I have a much lower opinion of Creative Assembly than I did before Rome came out, but that doesn't mean Rome's a bad game. Like, now that they've patched up a bunch of the problems and fixed some of the terrible mechanics in the game, like where my favorite video was from the Angry Joe show, and like he's got all these pictures of like the little army units, like how they'll appear as like a square. My favorite one is like these army units rush the gate, and then it's the computer AI units. And all of a sudden, they all just start running in this spinning vortex circle thing right outside the gate. And it looks completely retarded. And you're like, wow. And then the other thing that's hilarious about it is he intersperses these videos from the developer. And the guy's going, this time around, we're going to make sure that the AI is more advanced and better than before. And then it goes back to the guys and they're going running in circles and stuff.
No,
admittedly, that's a problem on release. Like, if you have a game that is like chock full of bugs, that is an issue, and that's going to detract from the game. But if the developer is willing to fix it and make sure that it comes together, so that eventually, maybe you have to wait, but eventually you get the experience that you paid for, then that's okay with me, I think. I don't think that's going to make a game into a flop. It definitely detracts from the game, but it doesn't make it a terrible game, as long as they fix it.
So I guess I'll make one point, and then I'll push it over to Chris and David so they can ask us some questions. But the main thing I would say is, while I agree with you in today's market, that is the case because everybody has online capability to get updates. For a game that is not multiplayer, which is Knights of the Old Republic, there is no expectation. I mean, this is before DLC. This is before any of that stuff even came about. So this is during the time where the game you ship is a game that people play. So while I agree that now, today, we can sit here and say, well, if the developer fixes it, it's fine. It's no big deal. Back then, there was Xbox Live, but it was still kind of in its infancy. Not everybody had, broadband speed connections, and, still today people don't. But the point is there wasn't that mechanism to fix the game. So you're releasing a game that is buggy, and for the dark side, the people don't understand what's going on unless they play the light side, and there's all these problems. Like, to me, that's a flop. You had a fantastic game that could have been amazing, but then you release it, and it's a single-player game, so people aren't going online to get fixes. People aren't doing all that, so it's done. That's a flop. If somebody plays that game all the way through dark side and doesn't go back and play light side, they will not understand it. It's over. But that's kind of my point. But
I'm pretty sure that they patched it on Xbox as well. I'm pretty sure. I'm not positive of that. I mean, I'd have to go look around on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'm pretty sure that they fixed the game for everyone, not just not just the computer guys. I mean, I'm not really sure. I don't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so long, honestly. But
yeah.
David, why don't you start off and drill us both with a question?
Let's think. I haven't played either one before. So wait. So one was the one that had the storyline errors.
No, it's two.
Two had the storyline errors, but one did
Yeah.
not.
But two, it didn't. It wasn't so much that the storyline was messed up. It's that like parts of the game didn't ship. Like there were a whole bunch. What Obsidian has had this problem for years, and I think it's actually why they went to Kickstarter to fund Project Eternity. Their publisher really rode them to get games out quick. And the other problem they had is they would underbid projects. So if you were bidding on a game project, they would underbid the time it would take them by a fair amount. And then when their time was up, they often wouldn't be done. And so the games that they shipped are often incomplete, if really good. Like, a lot of times the reason Obsidian is still alive is because people play through the game and they're like, why isn't this complete? It's so good. I wish you had finished it.
Yeah.
You're scumbags. And so, I mean, that's what's kept Obsidian afloat all these years, is despite the fact that they ship games that aren't finished, the games are really good, except for the lack of parts. So yeah, that's Obsidian.
Interesting. So we're trying to figure out which one is better, one or two. What one you couldn't pick light or dark side? Is that right?
No, you could.
No, one you could. Two is the one where the dark side story is partially not there, like chunks of it are missing. And then there was they were gonna do 5 or 6 endings for the game, and they're in the files. People have over the years for the computer restored some of the endings that were missing. With mods and stuff, but they didn't have the time or the effort to get those back in the game, unfortunately. I think David's dying.
I think he muted himself on accident.
He's got the cholera.
And I muted because I had to cough a lot. I don't want to. I mean, whenever you make noise, it shows you on the camera. I was like, maybe if I mute myself, it won't show me coughing all over the place.
Here's the difference between the two games. KOTOR, I'll be honest, KOTOR was about 3/4 good. The thing that really made KOTOR what it is, that made it such a good game, I think it was BioWare's first game, and so part of it was they were still kind of learning what they were doing. But the thing that made KOTOR so good was, number one, it was the ending of the game. which I don't want to spoil for you. But there's like this, it blows your mind. Like,
Yeah, it does.
Like your jaw drops. You spend the next half hour staring at the screen.
It wasn't their first game, but I mean, they did Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate. Like they've done a ton of really good games.
Oh, did they do? Okay.
Like they've
Oh
done.
yeah. You're right.
They have a good hit. It was the first Star Wars game that had been done in a long time that was done really well.
Yeah.
I guess is probably the best way to describe it. But
I forgot that BioWare's engine was the basis for like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale and all those games. I completely forgot about that.
yeah, they did Sonic, Shattered Steel, NBK2, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, Neverwinter Nights, Jade Empire. Yeah, several different games.
Essentially, KOTOR 1 was really good. Like it's a mind-blowingly awesome game. But like there are definitely parts of it where the game drags. Like you basically have to go. It's the quest to collect 4 things. The actual quest itself wasn't all that original. Like it's like go find the 4 pieces of the star map so you can go find the Star Forge. Like there were stories that they told in the context of the overall quest that were really interesting and really good. But like there were parts of the game that really drug on. The primary punch of the game comes with the ending. And the other advantage the game has is it has some really memorable characters. Like, the guys that come with you on your quests are super awesome. And if you've ever played any of BioWare's games, you understand what I'm talking about. Like, your allies are always really interesting. And that was kind of the first thing they did.
The thing that stands out to me about Knights of the Republic 1 is that the first time I played it through, I accidentally killed one of my characters.
Was it the cat lady?
Yeah, I killed the cat lady, and like, my second playthrough, I realized I had killed the cat lady, and she could actually join me, because I played it through and I was dark side the second time, and I asked her to join me, and she did. I was like, what? Like, I killed her the first time through, like, but I mean, we're kind of getting off the topic. I mean, the point isn't Knights of the Old Republic 1 versus 2. It's more of, was number 2 a flop or not? You know, was that kind of the focus? And I don't know, Chris, do you have a question?
Well, okay, so thinking actually back in the game, I actually did play the first one, now that I remember. But I didn't end up playing the second one because just I heard by word of mouth that it was really buggy. And so I decided to skip it. And so if we're asking the question, is it a flop or not? Well, I guess it definitely, some people didn't play it just because of that reason alone. They just didn't hear good things about it. So maybe it was a great game. I don't know because I've actually never played it. And that may be sort of indicative of a larger problem, besides whether it's a flop or not, but just talking about its press release and what people heard about the game itself. Looking back, it's probably a game that I'm going to go back and play at some point. But yeah, initially, I didn't end up playing it for that very reason.
Yes, I mean, I think that's kind of a good point. I mean, today, you know, it might be a better game because it's been fixed. But back then, you know. But anyways.
Here's why I think it was. Here's another reason I think it wasn't a flop. Like, essentially, like what Obsidian did is they took this really solid story from KOTOR 1, and don't get me wrong, KOTOR 1 was really good, but like I didn't feel like the story outside of the twist was particularly original. Like David, I don't know if you're ever gonna play KOTOR 1. Do you even care what it is?
I think I've heard before. I think I heard.
Probably shouldn't ruin it for the viewers, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for the
viewers.
Kids.
Viewers, mute your mute your thing for 5 seconds.
Spoilers.
Spoiler alert. I mean, the big originality of the game is that you're like this mind-wiped Dark Lord, and like you get to the end of the game and you're like, holy crap, I'm Darth Revan, that blows my mind, what is happening? I am Darth Vader. And that's like, it's a really awesome plot twist, but the game itself wasn't like the rest of the story I didn't think was that original. And when you go into KOTOR 2, they take the original game and the original characters, and they do a fantastic job of elaborating on them. Like, take Darth Revan, for example. Darth Revan is kind of the hidden bad guy of the first game, and like he starts off as this Dark Lord of the Sith and gets captured and blah blah blah. In the second game, they add a bunch of wrinkles to his character that provide these interesting ideas as to why did he do what he did? Why did he turn to the dark side? Why did he try to take back the Star Forge? Why did he do all these things? And what was so fascinating about his character was that, like, at least through 2, you find out that Darth Revan didn't fall to the dark side by some accident or that he was lured there through a lust for power. He essentially did it because he thought that was the only way he could protect the Republic. I thought that was really interesting. Like, that added a really fascinating wrinkle to his character that wasn't really... Those sort of complexities to character and motivation weren't present in the first game. And then you get Darth Traya, who is this sort of gray, hard-to-comprehend character who, like, she's this... Essentially, she's like a seer. She can sort of see the future and predict what's going to happen and all that stuff. And when you get to the end of the game... Like, she's spent time, like, she starts off as this great Jedi Master who's really famous and trains lots of students. She trains Revan, among others. And then, after that, she falls to the dark side and does a bunch of stuff. And then when you finally meet her, she's sort of gray, and you don't really know what she wants. She's not really a Sith Lord anymore, but she's not really a Jedi Master anymore. And you're like, what? And she follows you around and gives you all this advice and is helping you solve problems. And the whole time you're like... But is she really my ally? I don't know. Why is she following me? What's her motivation? And when you finally get to the end of the game, like, all of her actions take on this layer of complexity and interest through all the plot points that have been developed into the game, and it makes her just this fascinating character that you've never really seen in Star Wars before. Like, essentially, like, your character in KOTOR 2 was a general in a war, and she fights all these different battles and ends up essentially becoming, because of all the death she's around, she becomes sort of this living injury in the Force, essentially, like this wound. It's like, it introduces this idea that if the Force is a living creature, it can be hurt and harmed. Like, if it's the life force that binds the whole galaxy together, you can hurt it. And because the General has gone around, your character is called the General, and because the General has gone around and killed so many people, she's become this wound in the Force. And you get Traya, whose life, because she's a seer, she kind of sees into the future, she has been controlled by the Force, basically, for her whole life. And that's kind of how she views herself, is she's kind of like this puppet to the Force. And when she loves your character so much and helps your character, because in your character she sees a possible death for the Force and freedom, so that she can act in whatever way she wants, and the Force isn't dictating her life and showing her the future. And like, she's, whether she was on the light side or whether she fell to the dark side or whether she was helping you, like, it's just this really interesting motivation for her character. Why does she do what she does? It's because she doesn't want to be a puppet anymore, essentially. Like, it's really interesting, I thought. And, like, the game was buggy, but the story was so good and so interesting that I thought it was well worth dealing with the bugs. And that's why it's not a flop. Like, it was really good if you can get past the bugs.
And unless you play Dark Side the first time through and don't understand anything, because they don't add any closure to the game whatsoever. But we're out of time. And so really it comes down to what David and Chris decide. Obviously, I've got my position, and I'm going to say that it was a flop because I had to play through the game twice to actually understand what was going on. And so, David...
It's karma. You shouldn't have played Dark Side. You were punished.
David, what say you?
Well, I do hate when games come out incomplete, or they expect us to just expect or be like, oh, of course a game won't be ready for release, you know, like Diablo 3 when it came out, or all the different things. Like, we just expect the first week just to be terrible and bugs. I don't think that the gaming population should be required to expect disappointment as the status quo, or no longer be disappointed by what should be disappointing. But the plots definitely sound very interesting. More so interesting than the last few movies that came out. But yeah, so I guess it's hard not playing it because a lot of it's the experience. That the story could be amazing and the camera angles, could be terrible, and then the whole thing would feel terrible to me or something like that. But I guess I'll go with not flop because people were able to enjoy them. Though I do wish gaming, developers would get past the contracting and bidding for times and stuff so that they could just produce just wonderful products, like something we could just sit here and all rave about versus have to deal with silly problems like characters that we're missing
Kickstarter,
from
baby.
stuff.
Kickstarter.
Yeah, take
It'll
it back to the
solve-
people.
It'll solve all our gaming woes.
Chris, what say you?
Well, I think it's hard to call it a flop. BioWare's still around. They're still making great games. They didn't tank because of a buggy release.
It was Obsidian War that made the second one.
Obsidian, excuse me. And so, yeah, I'll agree that it's problematic, but at the same time, I think Derek's convinced me that it's a game that I actually would go back and play, simply because of the story itself. Especially since they've gone back and then fixed any issues. I empathize with your initial pain. Being a big fan of Rome 2, I have experienced that same pain very recently, but I think I'm going to go with Derek on this one.
Through the copy machine! Yeah, victory dance!
Oh, whatever.
Destroyed.
All right, guys. Well,
Dominated.
Thanks for joining Gaming Banter this week, and we'll catch you all next week. All right, see y'all.
Go cry. Go hug your dog and your wife and weep for your failures.
Your successful life.
See you guys.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and feel free to take a look at our website, www.ultimategamedb.com, and subscribe to our channel. We would love to see you there.
Definitely also check us out on Facebook and Twitter. If you like us or follow us, you'll be able to see when we're posting new shows and also a lot of articles. The Ultimate Game Database posts a lot of stuff on what games are coming out that week, how the consoles are doing in the console wars, a lot of fascinating stuff.
Yeah, so subscribe, like us, tweet us, and we will see you next week. Bye!